On today's episode of the Wild Party Podcast, I'm speaking with Erika Allen, founder and CEO of Urban Growers Collective in Chicago. She is a visionary leader who is transforming the way cities think about food, community, and sustainability. Erika's journey began with her family's legacy at Growing Power and has grown into a powerful movement that turns vacant lots into thriving urban farms. Through her work with the Urban Growers Collective and the groundbreaking Green Era Campus, she's creating a circular model for sustainability, converting food waste into renewable energy, and teaching future generations how to grow healthy, local food. In our conversation, Erika shares how farming can heal communities, empower youth, and build economic opportunity while tackling climate change head on. Let's get the party started. Welcome to the Wild Party Podcast, where we celebrate the visionaries behind vegan, ethical, and sustainable business. In each episode, we'll dive deep into their journeys, uncovering the why behind their mission-driven business. I'm your host, Stefanie LaHart. Tune in with me for passionate discussions about overcoming challenges, innovative marketing strategies, and the power of using business as a force for good. So whether you're an entrepreneur seeking guidance or a conscious consumer wanting to support impactful brands, join us as we explore the stories behind the businesses that are changing the world for the better. Let's get the party started. Today's guest is a true force for change in the world of urban farming and food justice. Now, you guys know I myself am my own urban gardener here. I have done vegetable gardens, flower gardens, everything. And just knowing that there's someone like Erika out there that is actually teaching a whole generation of how gardening and farming works just really lights me up because, one of the things and one of the problems of our society in general is that we are so far removed from the food cultivation process that we have no connection with the land anymore. And Erika's really working on restoring that deep connection between land and people. So I can't wait to dig into her journey, her philosophy, and how she's redefining urban agriculture and what it can do for our cities and our collective future. Erika, I am so excited to talk to you. I want to know what it's all about and how we can bring this to LA because I know you're in Chicago right now. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's wonderful to be here. And yeah, excited to share a little bit about my journey and our work and some of the things that definitely are going to be our future together, whether it's in LA or, South Bronx or somewhere on the west coast of Africa. All of these things that we're doing locally have national and also global implications for growth and equity and having the kind of world we all want to live in.
Absolutely. And again, like I said in the beginning, it's like really reconnecting people to the land and how things work because I feel like I don't know, is it social media's fault that people honestly they don't even know how food is grown anymore. But let's take it back to you. Give me a little bit about your background and where you came from because I know that you were raised on a farm. Your father actually had started another organization called Growing Power. So what was it like for Erika growing up, and learning about agriculture and farming and then looking at the world around you and being like, why don't other people know this?
Yeah, I grew up on a small family farm outside of Milwaukee and was early in my life. It was drilled into me that, that being able to work hard and understand how food was grown was going to be really valuable in my life. So, not something I realized until I was well into my work. I moved to Chicago to go to art school. I'm a visual artist. It's part of my identity and part of my practice, both in terms of my studio practice, but then my work in the world as a social change activist. So the work that I was called to do is really around And I did this after pursuing and receiving my master's in art psychotherapy, was around healing work, especially for teens who I saw were really being left behind, being incarcerated instead of, receiving cognitive behavioral therapy, career supports, having safe environments to just sort of develop in a holistic way. And saw my work as an opportunity to intersect both food security, because I also saw at the same time that there was economic disparities in my community, that there wasn't equitable access to healthy, delicious foods that were culturally affirming and affordable, and an opportunity to kind of bring these worlds together through urban farming. My father, had been developing and working in Milwaukee, and he started kind of in a similar way. It was being called to, was running, trying to farm, and he kept being asked to put in a youth garden or work with, juvenile justice. And so these parallel things were happening. And then 9/11 happened. And I realized I was working at a small social service agency and running emergency services, including a food pantry, and sort of saw the natural evolution of that work, being growing our own food and supporting families to be able to have not only food access, but opportunities to reconnect with where food comes from. One of the big, I think, failings within our education system and just sort of how we value or look at land is that we've kind of separated ourselves. This is, 25 years ago. I knew that I was one of a few in my generation that knew how to grow food from seed to market, to understand all of those pieces, and how if young people are growing up in the city and don't have any of that access, how do they connect with the environment and the land in a way that truly builds wealth, property ownership and stewardship, and being able to share those resources or be able to build on those resources is how we build wealth, right? Property, home ownership is one of the first things. It was the GI Bill coming back from World War II that was supposed to be the great equalizer, which of course did not hit equally across ethnic and racial lines. And food is a determinant. You can see where there are lots of choices of food. If those things are there, there's usually prosperity and an opportunity for many choices, and we don't think about it. This is where the food desert terminology was really helpful, because a lot of people didn't realize that, oh, when I go down the street, there's all these choices. Why don't those people eat in these places? Whereas in many of our communities, those options are not there. Both rural and urban environments have very limited, especially at that time, very limited food options. Now I think there's a greater awareness. I think this has improved because there's so many more people who are inspired because of my dad's work, and the many innovators who contributed to a new reality of what it could look like to grow food in cities, and look like to grow food collectively in a way that's also complements and is commercially viable. Is a continuum of work that I've been privileged to be part of. I also look at it as public health, and I think it's important, especially in these sort of, not sort of, but I'm always trying to like split the difference in these very caustic times where, health and science is politicized, when it shouldn't be. That there's a rigor around our scientific community, for better or worse, and our academic community has been very, very good at upholding. That those are things that we can lean into, especially when they're not commercially motivated. If we can't trust that eating good food because the soil is full of nutrients, and that we can see what's in our food, and that we can trust that what we're putting into our bodies and that of our children has all the building blocks for life, we're good to go. But we know at this point that that's not the case. And there's opportunities for building communities in ways that we're prioritizing health and care, and also being realistic about the true costs of what it costs to live, to be in a house, to pay bills, to have, all the things. Trying to kind of create that middle ground where we're able to have economies that pay people a living wage, that honor the people doing the work, and the work of harvesting, the work of building, the work of that requires physical and technical skill that's often denigrated in ways that also racializes big parts of our community. So all that to say concerned me. I continued my work. I'd make a lot of art about these things, but most importantly, that I think I've been successful as the founder of Growing Power Chicago office, coming back in 2002 to support and build on my dad's legacy to create a lineage of growers that can grow food in the city. And now, as we've moved into the peri-urban area, that we're able to grow in a rural, more spacious environment, but with the same intensity. Urban agriculture is about being able to grow food in smaller places, densely occupying every single space in that garden or that mini farm, that parcel to feed community. And to feed community in terms of nourishment for our bellies and for our bodies, but also spiritually, to be able to have safe spaces. And that dichotomy is really powerful for teens and for young people who are still forming their identity or kind of thinking differently about how they may want to conduct their lives. And the spaces that we've been successful, I'm a she, her, hers. We, us, I say we a lot because I've never done this work solely by myself. The work I create in my studio is mine. But even that is influenced by the people and places and nature that's around me. And I think when we're able to embrace the sort of, you know, dichotomy of the individual and the collective, we're able to think differently about how the things that we do impact the environment and each other. And to me, that philosophy, the way that we've been able to evolve from like really proving, having to kind of Chicago style prove it, and to do so in a way that everybody can see benefits in the work that of growing food and bringing community together to evolve to literally, changing the trajectory of lives, to be able to have a young person go from only seeing one or two options that may not be good for themselves or the community to being able to literally, become farming experts, to be able to really speak to the deeper causes of inequity and poverty, and to be able to create new industries and economy that are non-extractive is really the crux of my work.
Yeah. Well, there is so much in there, Erica, that I want to touch on. First of all, what you said initially, just about, things not being equal and free for all. Totally true. I don't know if you already caught this from my accent, but I'm from the East Coast. I'm from Philadelphia. So growing up in the city like you do, it's like, I didn't really have any connection to the land. I lived in a certain neighborhood. I only saw that neighborhood, and it wasn't until I got out into the world that I was like, oh, things are different for other people. Like growing up, I didn't know that. And also, it made me more aware of how disconnected I was from things like the food system and how things work. I call it like how the world works, right? And
Mhm.
as I've moved on in my journey now and through my life, like I'm so grateful to meet people like you and other people like Gwenna, who runs the Vegan Food Bank of LA, to be able to, to connect with people like you that are like, we need to help people to re-experience what it means to live collectively and also be connected to the land, which we've totally lost at this point, if you ask me. I feel like we're so reliant on factory farming and things like that. And again, as a vegan, I'm totally against that. But like people don't know where their food comes from. And everything's like a science project of like, how can we make another shake? It's like, why are we making so many
Yeah.
protein shakes? Why can't you eat vegetables? Like you don't even know that there's protein in vegetables, right? So when I was first introduced to you and found out what you were doing with the Urban Growers Collective, I was like, "Oh my God, teaching an entire generation what it means to sustain themselves through the land." And that was so powerful for me. So,
Mm.
I know you had the experience with your dad of growing power, but then what was it like then that then took you to be, wanting to then start the Urban Growers Collective and expand it like you have? Because now you're actually farming across like 11 acres, I think it is. And you have your mobile units and things like that. So, and your Green Era campus, which I've read about. So, what was it then that took you from where you started with what your dad had done to, I'm going to change this, morph this, and make it bigger and more impactful? Because you're doing a lot and not other people are doing it. So you're creating the blueprint of what other cities should be following, which you know. So how did that start for you that you're going to do that then?
Well, I appreciate that perspective. I mean, it's I'm definitely not as big as what Growing Power was doing MS. Um, Really, the what I said earlier around legacy and lineage. So the transition of the Chicago work was 16 years of projects that then transitioned into Urban Growers Collective as a new standalone 501(c)(3) when Growing Power closed. Oftentimes, not-for-profits continue well past their achievement of their mission. And I look at Growing Power, especially Inc., like the entire mothership, as accomplishing its mission. It seeded the field. It showed people what was possible, including me. I came back to go forward. I use this Sankofa concept that you look backwards in the present to go forward. So this idea of weaving the past to create a new future is very much part of how I work and how I think about the work. And it is in different phases. You know, you have your startup phase where you're just kind of proving out this idea that it's possible. And it was a lot of that. And I had the privilege of being able to go up to Milwaukee and see this amazing lab of all of these innovations, aquaponics, vermicompost, composting, mycology, like all of these things in one space, constantly changing and evolving based on the talent and the people and the cultures coming through this space, and including, the work I was doing, which was taking those ideas and then putting them on the ground and manifesting them to even small scale, at these, 9, now 11 sites. They didn't just pop up overnight. It's literally, 2 decades of work. We have a farm in Grant Park. This is our 20th season. So I started that. That was one of the first projects that I was privileged to be able to begin operating. It is very much growing food in Chicago's front yard, and to just impact the idea that vegetables belong everywhere. They're part of our landscape. What would it look like to have productive landscapes that are edible forests, and also spaces where young people can actually get employed, get supports to learn all of these things that we can contribute to having. I'm an omnivore, but I'm often vegan, just for the record. I love my vegans. But I also understand that we meet people where they're at. So when I'm working with teens and I want them to eat more vegetables, I'm going to start where they're at. Like, let's grow some vegetables you love. And bit by bit, new ways of living and new ways of kind of thinking about the ethics of what and how we eat begin to emerge. And I think that's been a big part of our work, is creating those realities so that people can see not only that it's not the first time someone's come up with these ideas. This has happened multiple times, even within the last, within my lifetime. 70s, there's a lot of folks doing this work and kind of going back to the land because they wanted to, recover from the Vietnam War, and really were thinking about living in a different way. And the economic reality of growing food for a living is very challenging. It shouldn't be, but it is. And I think we've gotten to the point where there's a lot of value on local. There's a lot of value on knowing who your farmer is, and incredibly important for all of us to know that when we all participate in our local food system, we're really enacting democracy in so many different ways. And so I think I've been very conscientious of these issues throughout my career, both as an artist who deeply, deeply understands the importance of the freedom of expression, but also the freedom of place, being able to move young people, especially in cities, and I'm sure it's the same way in LA, and other places where it's not easy for some of our young people to literally travel because of gang lines, because of hot spots and other things that some of us have the privilege of not having to worry about, but our young people do. So being able to merge all these realities, like, what do you pick first? Like, you know, eat only vegetables, or let's get you out of your community so you're not shot. Like, that's the reality of our work, and being able to do both of those things in time, but sequencing, which is our mission, rooted in growing food, We cultivate nourishing environments which support health, economic development, healing, and creativity through urban agriculture. We work in the city, but these same things could be applicable in a suburban arena or in a rural. And I think all of those things are important. Have been a big part of the work that I've been able to continue on the lineage, but it really just has continued on. It's just a different structure and a more hyper focus on Chicago only or Chicagoland as opposed to the entire world. It's growing power, implement locally, influence globally. And I think for us, we're moving in that direction as well, but in a different pace because we have this green energy component with Green Era that allows us to really bring all of the pieces together with an economic center that is super useful, that's not replicating systems that exploit people or the environment, and it's a climate ready and adaptive technology that allows us to transition in ways that everyone can be involved in and build these sort of these caring, economies of care and sort of mutualism, with the reality that we still have a harsh economic reality that makes people make very difficult choices that they wouldn't be making if they had other options. So
Yes,
creating the
and
options.
yeah, and it really, I mean, it does come down to options. I mentioned being a vegan, but I fully acknowledge that that is a luxury for me and for most people because I have the ability to make choices and the financial stability to say, I'm going to make this choice and it doesn't matter to me what that cost over this because I have the money to do that. And I know that's a luxury a lot of people don't have. So when we're really talking about equity and things like that, you starting a nonprofit like this, you still have to have funding to do things. So
Yes.
where were you able to secure the funding to start a project like this? To just let you know, I actually have a history of nonprofits. I started my own many years ago in the breast cancer sector. We were helping women who were dealing with breast cancer to pay their bills. And I remember being very excited about, like, we had this idea as a group of friends. And the next thing it was like, well, how do you get money to pay for this stuff you want to do? Even if we're doing a fundraiser, well, who pays for the cost of the venue and things like that? So, it always does come back to, like, how do you secure the funding in the beginning to do the project that you have kind of brewing or that you have create it. So for you, what did that look like to like even get the Green Era campus off the ground? Where did you find your supporters?
Well, the Green Era campus is like it's the end of the rainbow, but the beginning of another rainbow. So, for me, I started off very much. I was a teaching artist, and I just started, and I wanted to focus on youth. And there was something called Gallery 37 here. That was actually my first job out of art school here in Chicago, teach as a young teaching artist. So I just applied to that program, but included an urban ag component, and started doing national grant writing to support growing power, and really as a bridge to open the Chicago office, which took me about a year. And I was learning and understanding what the trajectory could be, and it just kept building and building and building. So fee for service, so being able to get funded to build a garden, and then using that as revenue, mission aligned revenue, to hire and keep building staff, but also training folks, so having to like both train, innovate, and then provide services kind of simultaneously, to accelerate and catch up, but also to get more and more kind of outreach and take this material and be able to put it on a broken, concrete on a parking lot and grow a farm within a season. Like being able to do that and explain how that's done, when it hadn't really been done before, was a lot of the work. And that demonstration and efficacy over and over again, and having people evolve and see and involve and become more involved, to see it everywhere, and then to really challenge sort of the status quo of what was then acceptable, which was fine, right? Like was fine. It was fine to have a 3 by 4 foot box outside of a school classroom. Beautiful, important work, but that's not going to feed a community when you have a 9/11 incident and you realize the entire food security system is broken. At that time, there was 7 days of food that if there was a breakdown for a city like Chicago, which is still like third largest in something or another. I should know all these stats, but I can't keep them in my head. But just the idea of that, like not even quality of food, not even like vegan versus omnivore ethic, like we're not even talking about that. Just like there's an emergency, people got to eat, and that really drove me. So I think so. Since then, we've come a long way. There's an entire ecosystem. There's work that we may have like started, but really has evolved, and people have specialized, and that took a combination of lots of sweat equity, lots of extra time to prove, lots of um, real clever kind of stacking of resources to sort of patch together enough funding to pay us ourselves as we were building this out and to build a sector, and also to sort of shift the understanding and like of anti-racism work and anti-oppression and the connection with food apartheid as opposed to food deserts, to really kind of continue building the understanding that these systems are not accidental, and that often if people will adapt to what is available, and to be able to expand those realities, right, to like here's other options, and also to integrate that within early childhood development, to be able to work with policymakers who are concerned about public health, and the ability for all of us to be able to flourish. Like all of those things are possible if we have models that we can see and build on. And I think the work has been very successful in that. Green Era is sort of the next sort of iteration, because we're also including the complexity of energy, creating energy out of food waste, and creating a form of renewable natural gas, which is just methane that is emitted when you break down food waste or in our bodies. When we eat food and we pass gas, that's methane. So understanding the technology that's really has always been available, but it hasn't been prioritized. And as often, like our work, I have to kind of deal with a little bit of false propaganda, because the kind of anaerobic digestion, which just means breaking down food waste within a contained environment to be able to grow more food, only food waste only, but we deal with all the food waste, so the bones, everything, because in nature, when things break down, it is a combination of everything. So it's not like the compost in the soil is not vegan.
Right.
What we pull from that, and what we choose to nourish ourselves with is, and can be and should be, right? Like that would be paradise. So being able to think and understand that, and to be able to harness that energy to create fertility, which is just that food waste broken down, methane captured. So then we have a renewable form of natural gas, and we're capturing that methane before it hits the environment, the atmosphere, which is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases and climate change, something within our grasp, and it solves like 10 problems. So I'm able to keep that food waste local. I'm able to break it down. I'm able to then take take the byproducts, make new things, uh, fuel 3,000 households, and also grow more food. And to be able to do that within an ecosystem is a circular economy. And so I can add more and more complexity to that as it develops, because there's a revenue center that's profitable, that's not exploiting from people or and the environment, and creates a new paradigm, because we have the consciousness of both knowing that we need to enter the marketplace profitably, but without exploiting people or the environment, and bringing everybody along with us, which I've been very successful in doing over the years. Challenging, challenging, but successful, with manifesting these ideas. And so Green Era really is that confluence of not-for-profit work, social enterprise work, and for-profit work within the same physical footprint. And when we're able to see those things operating individually, but in tandem, we're able to look at how we can model other systems within our society to do the same thing. And that's super exciting. And for young people and elders to come together and share respect where we all are in our cycle of life is also a reflection of that circularity. So young people being able to get mentored by their elders, learning about recipes, learning, oh, this is how we used to do it in a respectful coexistence. That's also peacekeeping. So we're able to do this because we had so many years of problem solving, because it wasn't here's a bunch of funding, go ahead and do it, because there were other entities that had that privilege. I did not, and my kind of like generation of folks doing this work did not, but we did have the benefit of the civil rights movement, the benefit of, the Black Panthers with, breakfast, free breakfast, all of these things that have always been around from all kinds of social movement, the Quaker movement, et cetera, to be able to care for community. We're just replicating those things in these times.
Yeah, so much of what you said there is just so important. And again, it's like we're so far removed about how things work and how where we need to take the future that, relying on people like you and organizations like the Urban Growers Collective is where we need to go. So when you are developing a program like this, where have you found your most valuable stakeholders are? And then how do you get them on board? Because like you said, I mean, you have to get everything comprised from not only location to, let's say, social services to police support to the community. So how are you able to like get all these people, I guess, into the same room and get them to understand collectively what this means? Because it's one thing to say, hey, we're teaching kids how to grow vegetables, to we're actually creating a movement, like, because that's what you're doing.
I mean, I think it's exactly like today, talking with you and sharing what we're doing. This work doesn't happen overnight. It's not like a one and done, like let me have a couple community meetings and walk away and that's that. It's season after season, year after year, being on the ground and building out these realities. Having a collective of partnerships, an ecosystem of partnerships. For me, collective is that the work is always collective, regardless of, when you're growing food and you're doing so in a complex social structure, it's you can't do, there's no individual like I've been doing it a long time and I have this certain lineage, but everybody is important within the context of these kinds of food systems. That there is a hierarchy based on experience. When I go to a community, for one, I don't just go into a community and say I want to do this. We were invited to for Green Era. We were invited to a community planning process, and the community decided that this was an important catalyst for economic and environmental development, and to bring industry into the community that we're located in Auburn Gresham. So that was a great match. Our South Chicago farm, we were part of a larger public health process around food and fitness and how to integrate and create spaces that were safe and verdant and where people could have physical activity, even just walking, and to do that safely, and also having a space where we can grow food and really understand um, you know, how to do that in a city at a multitude of different scales, all within the same space. That's South Chicago Farm. Grant Park, the art on the farm, really emerged out of a question around the commons and farming for Chicago, and being able to prove that food growing in the city is beautiful and important, and that reflects all of our cultures, and that young people have agency to come downtown and farm. So all of these things together really, I think, lead to that ethos of valuing people and the environment, being able to imagine new realities, and for policymakers to kind of pivot the ways that we're looking at community economic development to go beyond real estate and other things that's all important, the taxes, et cetera. Especially within cities and states like Chicago and Illinois, where we have alignment, we have a lot of alignment, and it's something alignment around what we value, and that we value our farmers, that we value, the dignity of every family and individual, and that's reflected in how we both what kind of food system that we participate in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really helps to build that pride in your environment, in your neighborhood, in your city as well, which I think is, lost in a lot of ways. Maybe because of the news access we have at this point, where we only hear about
Mhm.
the bad all the time. We never hear about the good that's being done in communities or the pride people have in their communities. So I'll tell you kind of an interesting story. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Nairobi, and I was so
Mhm.
struck that no matter where you looked, if there was a small plot of land, somebody had gardened on it. Like there were vegetables growing everywhere. It was
Yeah.
crazy to me. And what really struck me was this. Nobody was destroying somebody else's garden. Nobody was intentionally vandalizing stuff. And I said, what a beautiful thing to be able to go and grow something. And then your neighbors honor that. It's like, yes, this is, you have done something that deserves to live and be cultivated. And I was just struck that, like, I guess there was no destruction of something that had grown. And I want to see that here. I want to see people honoring spaces and communities in that way where you're like, yes, this is important, not only because it helps to build food security, but it also because it's a point of pride for our neighborhood that we have this and we take care of this together. So with that said, you've had some really big names really become aware of what you're doing, specifically like Michelle Obama. So having her interested in some of your programs, has it helped you to move forward? And what does that narrative look like for you when you're trying to get maybe other bigger names out there in the political sphere and even maybe in the, I don't know, we'll just say celebrity sphere to get them on board? Is that something you try to cultivate or look for? Or, what does that look like, I guess, for the future? Because, everything's like a meme now. Can we get, a good social meme going for urban collectors that, would just really, I think, put more awareness on what you're doing? Because I think maybe a lot of like the explaining is a lot of work is what I'm saying, right? It's like when you're trying to explain what's an urban farm. Am I wrong on this?
No, I think you're right. I mean, for me, having being in alignment with larger kind of like movements. So our connection to First Lady Michelle Obama was her Let's Move campaign, which my
Mm,
father, as a NCAA athlete, and he's still in the Hall of Fame and all that kind of stuff. As a farmer, as a Black farmer, and as a former like superstar athlete, that was sort of the kind of intersection. And then because of the work that translating the work to Chicago, we had just set up a kind of the first built environment farm in Bridgeport, so which is historically significant place to be farming in. Dr. King had quite a few problems during the civil rights campaign in Bridgeport. So full circle is really powerful and representing the transformation of democracy in Chicago, to be able to just be, sort of like to host her coming to see this stuff we were doing, which is growing food in an old truck depot, transforming a space to be food security by women, and led by a woman, and operated by women, and teens, that we were able to literally transform a space into a thriving food system, including the mobile market that really kind of sort of intersected all of the pieces. If you're growing the food and you're able to transport food, at that time it was former city buses, initiated by a group called Food Desert Action, and that eventually was merged with Growing Power, now Urban Growers Collective here in Chicago. There's a Let's Feed Phil episode for Chicago, where he comes on the bus and shares the experience. Those kinds of things bring awareness, like to our work. It inspires, most importantly. So I don't do the work for the gram, although I do post a lot on the gram, because it helps to influence the reality, and to see so many influencers and people growing food and like embracing this is really, the kind of tipping point that has been reached with my dad's work, with the good food movement is not a revolution. It's just like the simple idea of like good food and growing your own food, and working with your community, however you define community, to nourish and to care for one's family, one's neighborhood, to be curious about other people's food culture. So it's building, peaceful civil society. It just involves everything. And so, of course, people who have a lot of influence in the world recognize this pluralistic, as President Obama shares a lot when he speaks about democracy. And a healthy democracy, we don't all think the same thing, but we do agree on certain things, like everybody should eat good food. You know, I'm not going to talk about vaccines, but I can be controversial about that. But we all deserve a baseline of public health, dignity and respect, economies where no one's exploited, and that everyone sees a fair share of the dollar. And that with that foundational agreement, then we can do all kinds of other things. So celebrities and people who really have that kind of perspective, whether it's a Chance the Rapper or Common, or I'm trying to think of some of the other um, just amazing local Chicago celebrities that really embrace this and understand this, and because they have such an influence, can carry these ideals that to make them more and more of everyday people's reality is, I think, really important. But you got to see something. Like if I can talk the way I talk because I've done the work. And I say this to the next generation, like who I think often wants to leapfrog, and I rightfully so,
Yes.
because it feels very urgent. But I'm in the role I'm in because I did 30 years of this work. I grew up doing it. I put the time in. I made, and it doesn't mean that from the jump start, no one has to go out and create this reality. The reality exists. Now it needs to be stewarded and evolved and deepened. And there's so much more that any one individual can do in their lifetime when it's done collectively. And not collectively in a monolith either. Not, well, if it's not my kind of collective, then it's not collective. No,
Right.
collective means there's many different ways that we can perceive how we grow, how we develop, how we nurture, how we individualistically and communally participate in a society. And I love diversity. I don't need to agree with everything that everyone else says, but I do expect a high degree of civility and acceptance that we're not always gonna always be on the same page, but we can all agree to a good tomato. I have a firm, I would lay some cash money on it, and that having that experience and doing that together means a lot. And regardless of what's in your bank account, that there's an opportunity for us to really build a new kind of thinking through the garden. And through Chicago, we're Herbs and Horto. It's literally our motto, sitting in a garden. So I couldn't ignore that, and I continue to believe that we can have these amazing green eras where that what we're doing in Chicago, we can come down to LA and replicate that. We can go to Montgomery, Alabama and replicate, or Jackson, Mississippi and replicate, or somewhere in Georgia, South Carolina. I could just everywhere, not just in cities that there's been a lot of this kind of progress, that it's really just because of where we coalesce, but these are things that can be applied everywhere.
Well, I mean, that's the hope that people see the model that you are building and understand that that can be translated into other areas and other cities. Like you mentioned, LA, even Philadelphia. I'm telling you, I didn't grow up seeing people grow. We went to the grocery store, you bought your food and you went home, but there was no connection what that was. And in fact, I'll tell you, this was my very first year as me being my own urban farmer, why in my first successful tomato crop that was so good.
Oh,
Erica, so good.
congratulations.
I will never buy another store-bought tomato ever again in my life. I'm like, if I cannot have homegrown tomatoes, I just won't eat tomatoes because the difference, like people don't even understand when they get something that is homegrown, and I think more thoughtfully than what we see in the what do you call
Yeah.
it? The just factory farming, even of vegetables. Like it loses all the flavor, all the nutrients. It's a different thing. But I know I'm preaching to the choir over here. You already had that figured out. But Erica, it has been so delightful to talk to you. You have taught me so much, and I honestly wish this conversation could go on for another 45 minutes. So, guess what? I'm going to have to invite you back because I have so many more
Oh, thank you.
questions. But thank you
Yeah,
so much for being on the show and
you're
sharing
welcome.
everything. And I would tell us the website so people can find out more about what you're doing and how to get involved.
The Urban Growers website is urbangrowerscollective.org, and Green Era is greenerachicago.com. And we're on social media. So Instagram, Urban Growers Collective, I'm on there as well. Erika Allen, you can find me as well. And just look forward to just this ongoing dialogue and curiosity of how we can all continue to grow together in all the ways.
Absolutely. Curiosity is best when it's curious about how to make the world better, which is what this podcast is about. So, again, thank you for being on the show. We've learned so
You're
much and
welcome.
we appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Party Podcast. If you're an entrepreneur or professional who would like to be on this podcast, please visit boomtownmarketing.com and click on podcast. We believe that every business has the potential to change the world for good, and we want to support our community to help make the world more ethical, compassionate, and sustainable for all future generations to come. And if you're looking to build your business, no matter what level you're at now, request your free marketing consultation at boomtownmarketing.com and click Get Started.